Good morning. As always, got to get the camera set up. Some of you are live right now with us, watching me set up the camera. Other places are going live. So I'll finish getting that set up here in just half a second, and then we'll get officially started. So, all right. Looks like it is starting. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Good morning. Looks like we are live on all platforms. So, as always, those platforms roll in at different times. So, as you're joining us, just come say hi. I'd love to know where you're joining us from. Are you here in one? I'd love to. So, the program that I'm using kind of takes all the platforms and gives me the comments in one spot. So, you can tell me what platform you're joining us on. And then Facebook Live has its own specific dedicated chat function as well. So if you're on Facebook Live, you can just say hi. And I'd love to know practice areas today. So we're going to talk a little bit today about creating a 4-day work week. This obviously is a little different depending on your practice area. So I would love to know where you're joining us from and what's your practice area. So let me get those comments up right here. Perfect. All right, we got a couple people here. Awesome. Everything's working. The technology is playing nice with me today. So thank you. As always, we always cut out the first couple of minutes as people are joining. So come in, say hi. Let me know where you're joining us from, which platform, if you're on any platform other than Facebook Live, and specifically what's your practice area, okay? And I'm going to cut that part out and start over. Good morning. This is Chris Guyman, the Time Freedom Lawyer. And today we're talking about your guide to a 4-day work week without losing revenue. So hopefully, I'm excited to see what this conversation brings today, because we talk a lot about making money and we're frequently having those conversations, but we haven't had a lot of conversations for a while about time management. And specifically, how do you get more done in less time so that you can produce the same amount of revenue or more while working less? And so as you're joining us, I'd love to know, where are you joining us from and what's your practice area? When it comes to creating 4-day work weeks, it can be a little practice specific. And so I'd love to know what your practice areas are so that I can customize this conversation based off of your individual needs. So let me know where you guys are joining us from and what your practice area is. So a couple questions just to get you thinking as we get started here. But I want to know, like, if you had one more day in your week, like one full day, what would you do with it? Is that something you would use to make more money? Is that something you would do to spend time with your family? Like, what would you do with an extra day in the week? So if you need to think of it as an 8-day week right now instead of 7, that's fine. But what would that mean to you? And this is not a hypothetical question. I want to know. In the comments, let me know. What would you do if you had one more full day in a week? What would you do with it? And that question is important. Before I get into how to create this extra time, one of the most important things to understand is what we call Parkinson's law. So Parkinson's law says that a task will take as much time as is necessary and as much time as is available to complete it. So let's put this into perspective. When do you get your motions drafted? Is it 3 weeks before the deadline, or is it the night of the deadline? Why is that? Right? Again, not a hypothetical. I'd love to hear in the comments when you get your motions and other deadlines done. But if you're anything like all the attorneys I know, you get your work done when there's a deadline. And so I actually had a good friend of mine, and as he scaled his business really, really fast, too fast. And he had an associate that was really bad, ended up leaving, didn't transfer anything over. And as he was scrambling to get stuff done and figure stuff out, about 2 weeks later, he realized that he had a trial for the next day. They hadn't done any of their pre-trial exhibits. They hadn't done really anything. And he had almost exactly 24 hours. It was slightly less than 24 hours to prepare for trial. Now, what would you do if you had 24 hours to prepare for trial, right? Obviously, he panicked, as I think every good lawyer would do, would panic a little bit to not knowing what they're going to do. But he then jumped in and made it happen. It was kind of crazy. It was, as he talked about it. Now, he didn't sleep that night, and he had to create a very tactful way of getting evidence in, because a lot of evidence was excluded because of failure to meet deadlines, right? But at the end of the day, he prepped for that trial in less than 24 hours, and the trial happened when it was supposed to happen, and he got as favorable as a result as he could have. His client was being sued, and his client did owe the money. So his job was just to mitigate the damages, right? And considering all of those facts, it actually went pretty well. His client was actually pretty happy considering everything, right? No bar complaints came, and he didn't get a malpractice claim. So that was a good win for him, right? But it only reaffirmed this point that normally, how long would you take to prepare for trial, right? Long time. We all would, right? But because he only had 24 hours, it only took him 24 hours to prepare for trial. And that's true with almost everything we have in life. Things will take as long as we allow them to take. And so part of what we call our Foundations of Freedom course is teaching people these rules of time and helping people then implement them in their practice and using them in your favor instead of against you, right? And that's how we're able to buy back our time. And so the biggest thing, if you only got one thing from this Facebook Live, this presentation today, it would be that you are doing a lot of things in your practice right now that are preventing you from hitting your goals. And if you were able to stop doing a lot of those things, you could then hit your goals, financial and otherwise, in significantly less time than you're spending today. And maybe you already know what those things are. I'd love to know, as you're joining us and having these conversations with us today, is there anything on the top of your mind that you're like, I know I'm doing this and I know I should stop? Again, not a hypothetical. I'd love to hear what you think those things are. Sometimes it's really easy, right? Sometimes it's really easy. You know that you shouldn't be doing that, right? Like when I was playing a bunch of video games at work, really easy to say, okay, if I stop playing video games at work, I will make more money, right? Didn't want to make more money at the time, so I kept playing the games, but still very easy to know that we needed to stop those things if I wanted to make more money, right? So if there's any of those things, just trim the fat right there, right? Sadly, you can only do that once, right? Like I can only identify video games and stop doing that one time. You're quickly going to get through the no-brainer stuff. Then we're going to have to get into what's the next stage of this, and that's Pareto's Law. Does anybody know what Pareto's Law is? So good. Yes. So it's called the 80-20 rule. I'm glad someone knew what that was. What it says with the 80-20 rule or Pareto's Law is that 20% of your work produces 80% of your results. And I did not believe this when I first read it, especially as an attorney. And at the time I was billing by the hour, right? And so I'm like, well, that's not true, right? I'm either billing and I'm billing the same rate on every single case, or I'm not billing, right? And so how could this possibly be true? And I don't know if anybody thinks that this is or isn't true. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you looked into something like Pareto's Law, the 80-20 rule, and thought, no, there's no way this is true? For me, as I started running through this in my practice, at the time, I was billing by the hour, and I was an everything attorney, right? I just started my own firm. I needed money, and so I took any case that would come to me. And I sat down and I was like, okay, well, where's my money coming from? And I actually listed every single case I'd ever had. Now, this was early on in my career. I had less than 50 cases my entire career at this point. So early, right? A lot easier to do this. I literally did it on a legal pad, and I wrote the case name, the practice area, how much total money I earned from the case, how many total hours I worked on the case, what their retainer was, and the last one was whether or not I enjoyed working on the case. And I listed all of my cases out, and I found out that almost exactly 80% of my total revenue had come from divorce and custody cases. And that was only, one of many practice areas. Estate planning is what I thought my core focus was. I did a lot of real estate stuff too. I was a real estate agent before law school, very familiar with the real estate laws from that, as well as I had a good mentor professor in college or in law school that was real estate. So I thought my focus was estate planning and real estate, and I did family law on the side. But when I did this analysis, I realized that even though it's just one of my many practice areas, it was 80% of my revenue. So 80-20, it rang true there. I also started running through and realizing that 100% of my headache clients, because sometimes it's not 80-20, sometimes it's a more stark contrast than that. 100% of them had come from clients who had paid less than, at the time, I'm almost embarrassed to admit this. I started out, my retainers were $500. I was like, yeah, just pay me for like an hour or two and we'll figure this out. I think my fees were $175 an hour. So I was like, yeah, like 3 hours, that's enough, or 2 hours and some fees, right? We'll figure it out as we go. And I realized that almost 100% of my $500 retainer clients were headache clients, and 100% of all of my headache clients had paid less than $1,000 in a retainer. And I didn't have a single headache client from someone who had paid more than $2,000 at the time. And so I immediately raised my rates my retainer to $2,000. It has since gone up from that as well. Okay. But I raised my retainer to $2,000, and I stopped doing every practice area other than, I want to say estate planning, divorce and custody cases. Man, my brain today. Right. So I found that the 80-20 rule worked in my practice as well. What that did for me when I did this analysis was I stopped getting distracted by all the other things. And this still happens today. Just today, I was on one of my office meetings with my team member here in Time Freedom Lawyers, and one of my law firm clients or team members stepped in and asked me if I would do a mediation for a real estate case. And it was kind of an interesting set of facts. I understand why they wanted us to be the mediator there, but and I was kind of interested, like I still enjoy real estate stuff, and I had to sit there and I was like, no, like I'm literally doing a presentation today on the 80-20 rule. I cannot take this and then in straight face talk to you guys and say, hey, don't take things outside of your expertise, right? So I told him no and said it. So even today, I mean, I have been a divorce attorney only for 7+ years, 8 years, and I still have these distractions. But by getting rid of the distractions, I was able to focus a lot more time on the things that were making me money. And my favorite math here is if 20% of the work produces 80% of the results, I'm not saying stop doing 80% of the work and only get paid 80%. What I'm saying is do that 20% twice as much. Now you're doing 40% of the work and you're getting 160% of the results, right? So you're maximizing your income while also cutting back your time. So these principles, they make sense, but you've probably heard of these before. You can Google Pareto's law, you can Google Parkinson's law. The other rule that I teach when it comes to time is what I call prioritization. So I have the 3 Ps of time, right? And it's just do the most important things first, right? I could do a whole hour or two on those topics, but for today's presentation, I really wanted to actually talk about like, how do we actually do that? Because you can tell me, have you heard of these things before? Right? Like who here has heard of Pareto's law or Parkinson's law and is still working more than 40 hours a week? Feel free to admit it. And if you're watching this on replay, still admit it. Drop it in the comments. I give bonuses to people who engage with this content. Okay. So no matter what platform you're on, if you drop a comment, we do read all of those. And I try to send bonuses to many of the people who comment. So don't be afraid to talk to us. So I want to know, have you heard of Parkinson's law? Have you heard of Pareto's law? Have you heard of prioritizing and doing important things first? And are you still working more than 40 hours a week? Don't be shy. Right. Yes, absolutely. Right. Almost every attorney has heard of these things. Attorneys are usually learned people, right? We like to learn, we like to study, and yet we still work a lot of hours. So why is that? And how do we fix it? So here are my biggest things. With these, I'm trying to think of what are the best ones I want to teach you first, right? The best systems that I can teach people like in one call is the biggest time assassins that we have. For attorneys, first and foremost is phone calls. Phone calls and emails, right? We've talked a lot about emails recently, but the biggest one is probably phone calls. Do not accept unscheduled calls. So what should happen no matter what? Now, don't take this as avoid your clients, don't answer their questions, that kind of stuff, right? No, that's not what I'm saying here. We do take care of our clients, but there are very few reasons why a client should be able to call their attorney and get them right then on the phone, right? And I don't know why clients feel this way, because if you call your doctor or your pediatrician or a therapist or any other professional and call them, do you ever get them on the phone? No, right? So we recently, it's been a couple of years now for this specific story, but my son thought it would be a really good idea to swallow not one, but 2 magnets. Obviously, if you swallow one, it's fine. If you swallow 2, it's a problem. And the biggest concern there is that if they separate and then get through the intestines and attach again, that they'll tear the intestines and kids die doing this, right? Kind of a big deal. So we panic and call our pediatrician. Kind of a big deal, right? Potential death. I feel like that's important. A lot more important than most of the things we do. He didn't answer the phone, right? Someone answered the phone. I'm not saying you should let your phones go unanswered, but it wasn't the pediatrician. And in that case, because it was an emergency, they said, take him to the emergency room, right? Here's the advice you need. Go to the emergency room and go get help, right? And ultimately, my pediatrician did check in with us to make sure that our son was okay. Same son that he got to hang out with at 6 weeks old because he had influenza A and almost died on us again. So this son's not easy to raise. He's tough to raise and keep alive for sure. But and our pediatrician has quite a bond with him because of that early childhood experience. And still, he didn't answer the phone. In my career, I can think of one time in which a client called and it was a true emergency. And in this case, he had his kids and the cops were at his door trying to take his kids away from him and threatening to put him in jail if he didn't give them to him. And they were wrong. They were actually trying to give custody to the mom, but they didn't understand there's some protective orders and other things in place. DCFS was actively trying to prevent the children from getting with their mom for safety concerns, but the mom obviously didn't relay that to the cops, and the cops are favoring the mom in this situation. And he calls our office and says, hey, like they're threatening to put me in jail. What do I do? That's the only time in my career where I felt that it was worth dropping everything I was doing. I was actually in the middle of a mediation as the mediator. And I said, hey, you guys are gonna have to wait a second. I need to take this call. That's the only time in my career, though, that I can think of that a phone call was an emergency that had to be answered right then. And so do not allow clients to call you without a scheduled call, right? If they call, your team then needs to be trained. You need to create an SOP on how to handle those calls. Take the questions, take the information, turn it into a list of questions, summarize it for me, whatever that happens there, but produce a summary of what's there and then set an expectation of when they're going to get back. So just like when you call our pediatrician, right? They take the thing, they say, hey, I'm going to check with either the nurse practitioner or the doctor, and I'll get back to you this afternoon or tomorrow or whatever they say, right? And then they get back to us. Have your team do the same thing. What you'll learn is that your clients don't expect to be able to talk to you 24/7. What they do want and expect is to get their questions answered and understand when and how you're going to do that. And so recently we had a situation where a client called, they're a very needy client, and they, asked a series of questions, and my team did a great job at summarizing. I think it was like 5 questions by the time we were done. And then they said, "Hey, look, Paul, who's the attorney assigned to their case in this case, he's in mediation today, and then he has trial on Thursday and Friday. And so if his trial ends early, he will probably get back to his emails Friday afternoon. But realistically, we do have a 4-hour block set out aside on Monday for him to get through all of his client communication. So I would expect to get a response Monday afternoon." So this person was literally calling on like a Tuesday at 4 and told they can't get an answer until Monday. Now, our team had confirmed none of these questions were emergencies that had to be answered before Monday, and talked to the client about that, made sure the client understood as well. But because we had that conversation, helped them understand why it was going to take a while, the client was totally okay with it. And then Monday afternoon, Paul sat down, did his communication, sent them the answers to their questions, and they were very grateful. So if I had told you before giving you all those facts that, hey, a client calls Tuesday and they don't get a response until the following Monday, who here would have thought that that client would be happy? Probably not, right? Legit. You can tell me if you think otherwise, but it's because we managed the expectation, the client was happy with it. And so that's one of the biggest things I wanted to talk about here. Like, as we're trying to create a system of freedom for you, the first thing is going to be identifying what are your biggest time assassins. I've given you an example, right? I can almost guarantee if you're answering your own phones, that's one of your biggest time assassins. And if you're handling your own email, that's going to be your other biggest time assassin. Those two things are one of the most easiest to identify, easy to delegate and solve problems. And we can often get attorneys 4 hours a day back on their time. You'd be blown away how much time you're spending on phones and emails if you don't already have a system in place for this. And I'd be curious, is there anybody on this call who has a system in place for answering phones and their email and is still working more than 40 hours a week and making less than $10,000 a week? I'd love to know. So here's the question is, do you already have a system in place for your phones and your emails so that you're not the ones doing those two things? So you have to have those two systems in place. And then you are still working more than 40 hours a week and making less than $10,000 a week. I know that's kind of raw to admit how much money you're making on a Facebook Live. So I understand if you don't want to admit it. But it's very hard. I don't know if I've met someone or not that is working more than 40 hours a week, has a system for those two things, and is still not making that much money. Because there are some people who love to work, right? Like Alex Hormozy, right? He works more than 40 hours a week. He has a system for his email and his phones, and he makes $100 million a year. So if you want to work crazy hours and make lots of money, that's totally fine. But I've yet to meet someone that is working more than 40 hours a week and not making good money if they have a system for their phones and their emails. But whether those are your time assassins or not, the best way to figure this out is to do what we call a time and energy audit. I'm not the creator of this. I got this directly from Dan Martell in his book, Buy Back Your Time. If you don't have a copy of that book, let me know. I'll happily send you one for free. Not free, let you pay shipping. I'll just send it to you for free. I've got a bunch of extra copies and would love to send it to you. But in that book, he talks about a time and energy audit. Has anyone here ever done a time and energy audit? This is an easy one to admit. So if you have done a time and energy audit, please let me know. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know if you've done one before. Awesome. Okay. Someone has. Good. At least someone has. So in Buy Back Your Time, what Dan Martell suggests you do, I'm going to suggest you do it a little differently. Now, Dan Martell makes way more money than I do. So if you want to do it however Dan says, feel free to do it how Dan says, but I'm going to walk you through how I think is the best way to do it as an attorney. because most of us are keeping track of our time, even if you're flat fee or contingency, like you're still aware of your time, right? So what Dan suggests is you set a timer on your phone for every 15 minutes. And when the timer goes off, you update your chart to say what you did during those 15 minutes. And then he has a column for how much money that was. He uses like $1 sign, $2 signs, or $3 signs. But it's to help you decide if what you've done is worth money or not, and how valuable that task it is for you. And the other column is, funny enough, I'm talking about Dan Martell, and I got a text from Dan Martell. And so I got distracted for a second. I was like, oh man, did he hear me? So the first column is what task you did during those 15 minutes. The second column is how much money you earned doing those things. Was it a high value task or a low value task? And the third column was how much did you enjoy that task? And you'll notice now I've talked about two different audits. I've talked about my 80-20 audit, and I'm talking about a time and energy audit. And on both of those audits, the last column is how much you enjoy things. That's an important element here. You should enjoy the things that you're doing. If you don't, you should delegate those things. But he does that every 15 minutes. And then at the end of the day, he also like highlights the things that are super, high income and high value. And he green, and like the things that are low earning and you don't like, he highlights red, and then he delegates the things that are the cheapest to delegate, right? And I think that's super helpful. He suggests doing it for an entire week. I have found that anybody who does it for 48 hours seems to get about the same amount of value as if you did it for a full week. And by the time you've done it for 48 hours, you start naturally changing your behaviors because you don't want the audit to reflect your bad behaviors. And so you don't get really good data after about 48 hours, although you do get good changes in behavior. So if you wanted to do it longer, you could. So what I'm going to challenge you guys to do is, one, I have a template for a time and energy audit. So if you raise your hand and say you're interested, I will send it to you. So you don't have to create one. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'll just send you the one that we have. But I want you to do a time and energy audit for at least 2 days. At least 2 days. You want to do longer, you can, but at least 2 days. With that time and energy audit, how I would do it instead of doing 15 minutes, because I don't like being interrupted, right? If you're in the middle of a project and your alarm goes off and you have to take notes, like that's going to decrease your efficiency. So what I like to do is I like to say, okay, this motion is going to take me 1 hour. And so I set a timer on my phone for 1 hour, and I set it so where I can see it. I see it running and I see it running down. That helps me stay on target. And then at the end of the hour, when the timer goes off, I then ask myself, how efficient was I during that hour? Did I get distracted with Facebook? Did I just work on the motion? Did the motion only take me an hour? Sometimes, I'm using Parkinson's law here again, right? If a motion should only take an hour, did I do it in just an hour? Could I have done it in 45 minutes? Did I need an hour and a half? I start paying attention to how long things are actually taking me. If I completed the motion in an hour, I then ask myself next time, could I do it in 45 minutes? And I'll go set the next motion on my calendar for 45 minutes instead of an hour. See if I can get it done in less time without losing effectiveness, right? But I like to kind of audit myself. Okay, this motion took me an hour. Did I do a good job, right? Did I do a good enough job? Because if I go from 2 hours to 1 hour and it's just as good as my 2 hour motion, I'm never giving myself 2 hours to do it ever again. But if I go from 1 hour to 45 minutes and it's not up to quality, then I obviously take another 15, 20 minutes and bring it up to quality, right? So just because I'm testing myself to see if I can get things done quicker doesn't mean I produce bad content, right? If I only had an hour and it takes me longer, that's fine too. But I audit myself. Did I stay on task? Why or why not? What distracted me? How come? And I spend some time working through that hour of how efficient I was. And then I do the same things Dan does. Was this a high income producing activity or not? And why? And was this something I enjoyed? And why? My challenge to you would be to do that for at least 2 days. And one, I think you'll actually make more money. Every single person who's ever done that has made more money during those 2 days and the subsequent days after, because you're being intentional with your time. But two, you're going to get really aware of what you're spending your time on and what you're not spending your time on. Because at the end of the day, to make $10,000 a week, this is the baseline that I teach most people on, right? If you are working 4 hours a day on your business as the CEO, and you're working 4 hours a day in the business as the attorney, you can hit $10,000 a week in less than 40 hours a week. And so, but what you have to do is you have to, for 4 hours a day, be doing the right on the business tasks, and for 4 hours a day, getting paid for the work you're doing. You have to be doing that. And so a time and energy audit is going to help you identify what things are you doing during the day that don't fit into those categories and are stopping you from hitting your goal. And if your goal is 50,000 a week or 5,000 a week, the principle is the same, right? You need to identify what things are you doing on your calendar that's not helping you do that. And so if your goal is 50,000 a week and you only have 4 hours a day to work in the business, that's 20 hours a week, right? So if your goal is 50,000 in a week, then you have to be doing things that are worth $2,500 an hour. And you might ask yourself, hey, I can only bill $500 an hour. So how would I do that? It's a really good question. And the truth is you can't be the only one doing it, right? If you bill $500 an hour, you'll never hit $50,000 a week being the only person who bills in your company. So to get to those next stages, you're 100% going to have to build a team. Well, guess what? I sit down every morning for 1 hour with my team here at Time Freedom Lawyers. And during that 1 hour, I teach them and coach them and train them on how to run our business, coach better, get better clients, those types of things, right? And then they go out and do the work. And we make a lot of money. And so how much was that 1 hour worth? If you take how much money we make and how much we spend, that's one of my most productive hours of my day. Same thing with my team, right? Once a week, I sit down with my law firm team and I coach them and I mentor them and we go through their KPIs and those types of things. And then they go out and do the work. Well, the team that I work with there, I spend 90 minutes with them and then they go do about $15,000 a week on average of work. So it takes me 1 hour and they produce $15,000. So that's a $15,000 an hour block. Not that I went and billed $15,000 that hour, but I earned $15,000 by teaching my team how to go make money, right? So it is 100% possible, just you can't be the one who's doing the work, right? So no way am I saying to go raise your rates to $2,500 an hour and then bill 4 hours a day at $2,500 an hour. That's going to be very tough. If your market allows for that, go for it, but most markets don't, right? But it doesn't change the fact that whether you want to make 5,000 a week, 10,000 a week, 50,000 a week, $1 million a week, it is doable. You just have to know the math. You have to know what activities are going to produce that value, and then you have to put it on your calendar and do it. And as an attorney, to get to $500,000 a year in gross revenue or $10,000 a week, you can 100% do that in 40 hours a week or less. Most of the people in our Foundations of Freedom or our Fast Track to Freedom coaching program, our 12-week program, they're doing that in 32 to 40 hours a week, and they can get to 10,000 a week in 6 to 9 weeks if they'll do the work. That's the biggest part, right? And knowing what that work is. So I'd love to know what questions you guys have. Are there any questions that you specifically have on how to get to 4 days a week without losing money? Okay, good. As those roll in, okay, it's a good question. They say, all right, well, if you say that you can get to 10,000 a week in 40 hours a week, then that's still 5 days. So how do you do it in 4? And it's a really good question. So I'm going to build on this a little bit, right? Like I said, my specialty is helping people get to $10,000 a week. But I hesitate to say that because that's, to me, the foundation and the starting point. I want to help you create enough cash flow that you can then do the things that you want to do. To me, true freedom is having enough time, money, and energy to do what you love. And so I find it's a whole lot easier to create more time and energy if you have cash flow. So the first thing I help people with is cash flow. The thing that you hear me talk about the most is cash flow, right? And then we use that cash flow to buy back your time, like Dan Martell teaches, and create the energy and really the desires that you want. So it's a really good question, and I want to clarify that. So how I have found that really any practice area can get to $10,000 a week in gross revenue in 32 hours a week or less. You need to have at least one full-time employee that can also do billable tasks. So I'm obviously a big proponent of flat fees and contingency fees. My least favorite way of billing for attorneys is by the hour. But mathematically, it's easiest to teach this by talking about billing by the hour. So that's why I asked what practice areas you guys were in. And I've got a couple people saying, I've got one person saying real estate, two people saying family law, and no one is saying any contingency fee areas right now. So that's interesting. But because the biggest pushback I get is on contingency fees. So we'll talk about that one as well. But let's talk with hourly first. So the average attorney in the country bills about $400 an hour. If you have a paralegal billing on your case, the best advice I've ever received, and now I give, is that your paralegal should bill 1/2 the hourly rate of the attorney. And so I used to not do this, right? I used to have before I learned this, my billable hour rate was $300 an hour, which was high for my area. And my paralegal was at 100. And I got complaints all the time about how expensive and how much was on the bill from the paralegal, right? Like sometimes it'd be like $1,500 from the paralegal and only like $1,000 from the attorney. And they're like, how's that possible? Like, why am I paying so much for your paralegal? So when I switched and said, okay, funny enough, I switched to $400 an hour at that time, which was the highest in my area. And I put my paralegal at $200 an hour. And there's actually some attorneys in town that were still just billing $200 an hour. So that was very high for the paralegal. But I told everybody, hey, look, my rate's $400. I'm good at what I do, and I'm going to charge for that. But whenever I can, I'm going to save you money and have the paralegal do it. My paralegal is 1/2 my hourly rate. And so whenever possible, she's going to do the work and I can save you 50%. That one change got rid of almost all of our complaints on billing. So obviously we then transitioned to flat fees, and that was even better. But you can do this with both flat fees and hourly. You can do it with contingency as well. But if we use that math, $400 an hour, and we times that by 16 hours a week, that's $6,400. And then if you take $200 an hour and you times that by 16 hours a week, that's $3,200. And you add that 32 plus the, what was it, 6,400. That's 9,600. So you would have to add another hour in there. You couldn't quite do 4 hours a day for 4 days a week to hit 10,000, but you're pretty darn close. I think most people here would be very happy to work 4 days a week and make $9,600. So we'll just stick with that math, but it's 100% doable. If you worked another, 0.6 of an hour and your paralegal worked another 0.6 of the hour, I think you're there. So very doable. And that was only at 4 hours a day, right? So skip one lunch and there you go. You're at your 10,000 and you have your entire Friday back. Would you skip a lunch to have your Fridays back? I know I would, right? So that's how you're going to do it, is to get to 10,000 a week and only work 4 days a week so take a day off and still hit the same revenue goal. You have to scale. You have to build a team. And so where I start most people at is having one person on your team that can help you with billable tasks. I really like hiring people that can bill time as one of your first hires. That is different than what Dan Martell suggests. If you look at his book, he talks about hiring like administrative employees first, like a virtual assistant or something of that nature, which are much cheaper to hire. A good VA can be $6 or $7 an hour. But I find the best one to teach someone who's starting a business and this is their first time really running a business and trying to hit 10,000 a week, is to hire someone who can bill and then make sure they know what their billing requirements are. Because if you pay someone, let's say $25 an hour, it's pretty aggressive for most areas. If you're in California or something, that's going to be more. But that's $200 a day. So let's even go more aggressive and say it's $40 an hour. I bet there's nobody here that has to pay a paralegal $40 an hour. That's $320 a day. If you insist that they bill no less than 4 hours a day, and you bill them at $200 an hour, that means that every single day they're generating $800 or more, and you're paying them $400 or less, right? You're probably paying them $200. But I'm using worst case scenario just to prove that it's impossible to lose money on an employee if they bill and they bill enough hours that you've made sure the math makes sense. So that's why the first hire I always suggest is someone who is a billable member of your team, because then you can't go upside down on them. And obviously there's a cost there, and you got to make enough to make it make sense, but that's the first person. So let's kind of wrap this up. That was kind of the biggest question we had, right? And so I kind of want to summarize what we've said here today. First and foremost, if you get nothing else out of this, I want you to believe that it is possible for you to work as many or as few hours as you want. There is no attorney that has to work more than 40 hours if they don't want to and still make a good living. And if you only want to work 4 hours a day, that's very doable. I've got a client who, she has an estate planning practice. She homeschools her 5, now I think 7 kids, and she only works 4 hours a day. She makes about 250 grand a year. It's 100% doable. So I want you to believe that. If you do not believe that you can work less than 40 hours a week, please direct message me. Welcome to put something in the comments as well if you're open to that. But if you're more comfortable direct messaging me, then direct message me. I'd love to get on a call and let's talk through that limiting belief you have. Because first and foremost, I want you to believe that you can work as few hours as you want. The less you work, obviously, the less you're going to get paid, especially for initially if you're doing the work. But you don't have to work crazy hours to make a good, comfortable living. That's the first thing. In order to do that, you have to stop doing the things that are preventing you from hitting your goals. The easiest way I've identified on how to figure out what's stopping you from hitting your goals is to do a time and energy audit. And so my challenge for you today is to do a time and energy audit. I will send that to you for free if you drop a statement in the comments saying you want one, or if you direct message me, I'll send you mine. So my challenge is for you to do a time and energy audit for 2 days or more. Really identify what is it you're doing and what is it that's stopping you from hitting your goals. What are those activities that you're doing during the day that are not producing results? And the best way to find that out is to audit your time and realize. And sometimes you'll be blown away. I did this with one of my employees. He's a commission-based attorney. He noticed that he was spending over an hour a day on ESPN. It was just 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 15 minutes here. But at the end of the day, he was like, "Wow, I spent over an hour a day on average on ESPN." And so when he said he didn't have time, what he really didn't have was good priorities, right? Cut the ESPN during the workday, and surprise, surprise, he had enough time. So do that. And then based on the information you do there, create systems and prioritize your day so that you can do enough income producing activities to hit your goals. You'll notice with that calendar, I told you 4 hours a day in the business, 4 hours a day on the business. So half the day you're the CEO, half the day you're the attorney. In order to make that money, you have to do attorney work and you have to get paid for that work, right? Again, a lot of the principles we teach in that Fast Track to Freedom course shows you how to do that. But the principles ring true whether you're part of a member of that course or not. So that's what I would say. Do that. So awesome. I see Jennifer said she'd love to see that audit. Jennifer will make sure we send that to you as well as anybody else who comments. The last thing I want to talk to you about is are you at the stage in your career where you want to earn $10,000 a week? Especially, are you at the stage in your career where you want to do that and work 30 to 35 hours a week? If so, I'd love to know if that's you. And my next question to you then is going to be, what's stopping you from doing that? I've just shown you the math today, right? 4 hours a day in the business, 4 hours a day on the business, get paid for the work you're doing, do the right tasks while you're being CEO and the right tasks while you're being the attorney, and you can hit $10,000 a week while working less than 40 hours a week. So is that something you actually want? There's plenty of people here that are probably like, hey, I'm already making that much. And so the answer is no, right? So that's fine. That's a good answer. There's other people here that are like, my client that wanted to only work 4 hours a day because she wanted to homeschool her kids. That's great too. That's not wrong. But if you're working full time, do you want to make at least $10,000 a week? I want you to be honest with yourself. Do you? Or are you, you're okay just grinding it out and not making enough? If your answer is yes, I want to make $10,000 a week and I don't want to work more than 40 hours a week to do so, are you willing to spend 1 to 2 hours a week learning how to do so? Like, is that a fair trade? Would you spend 1 to 2 hours a week to learn how to do that? And would you do that if you had 100% success, like 100% chance that you wouldn't fail? Be honest with yourself. I'm seriously asking this question. Do you want to make $10,000 a week? And are you willing to put 1 to 2 hours a week in to make that happen? Because we've got this stupid thing going on right now. I used to charge $10,000 for my $10,000 a week program. This was my thoughts. If I can guarantee you make $10,000 a week, will you give me 1 week worth of your income? And so it was set up that you would pay 10 grand. I would walk you through the 12-week program. At the end of the 12-week program, you either hit $10,000 a week or I give you your money back. I was like, risk-free, right? I don't do that anymore. The format was tough. And so what I ended up doing, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it differently. I've got a checklist that shows you exactly what to do. So far, we have a 100% success rate. If people do what's on the checklist, they hit $10,000 a week in 12 weeks or less. And I'll give that to you for free. But there's a catch. You have to commit to doing the work. So how I do that to make sure you're going to do the work, and we've got a 12-week challenge coming up. So it starts on the 28th, Tuesday the 28th, I think and we'll meet every single week for 12 weeks. I'll give you the checklist. I'll walk you through it. I'll teach you the principles, make sure you know how to do it. And if you do everything on the checklist, it's 100% free to you. But I'm going to make you put some skin in the game. What I'm going to make you do is I'm going to make you put $2,000 down, and I'll give it back to you once you've done everything on the checklist. So, little skin in the game, right? We know the checklist works, but you don't have to. It used to be if you hit 10,000 a week, you didn't get your money back. I'll give you your money back whether you hit 10,000 a week or not. All I'm asking is you do the work. You show up to the calls, you do the stuff on the checklist, you get your money back. So, Jennifer so far has said yes, but there's other people on this call I know that are thinking, are you willing to spend 1 to 2 hours a week to hit $10,000 a week? Because I can teach you the rest. The cool thing is, like, some people will ask me, what's the time commitment? I have a really hard time answering that question because your commitment isn't time. Like, it's not hours in a week. Your commitment is, are you willing to stop doing the things that are preventing you from getting there? Because almost everybody who joins the program works less. So what's your time commitment? It's probably less hours than you're currently working, but you're going to have to be a little humble. There are things you're doing right now that you're going to have to stop doing to get there. But I will give you this program for effectively free. All I ask is that you come to the calls, you put $2,000 down to put some skin in the game that I'll give you back, and then you do the work on the checklist. If you don't do the work on the checklist, you don't get your money back. You have to do the work, right? And the only other thing I can do to make sure that you succeed here is I give you, I want to put you in as part of our community. So I have found that the best way to succeed is when you surround yourself with people who are doing the same thing, right? So if you get off this call and you go hang out with a bunch of losers that are all like not making very much money and they're all sad and depressed and they hate their life, and you surround yourself with people who are sad and depressed and hate their life, what do you think is going to happen to you? You're going to be sad, depressed, and you hate your life. And I don't think money is everything. I think money is a tool that happy people use to make themselves happier and sad people use to make themselves sadder. So in no ways am I saying that money is the goal here. But I can tell you that if you surround yourself with a bunch of time freedom lawyers, people who are dedicated to creating the lives that they deserve, and they use money to get there, and they're not afraid to make money. They're okay making even massive amounts of money if that means it creates the lifestyle that they want. You surround yourself with people like that, you're going to succeed. And so we have what's called Attorney Freedom University. It's a school community. So you've got the community element where we work together as time freedom lawyers to help each other. We have weekly Q&A calls where we get together and, again, help each other. And then I have all of my foundational materials there. So the only downside to this 12-week program is that it's, an hour a week for 12 weeks. So there's only so much I can say. And especially if I want to answer questions, there's only so much I can do in 12 hours. And so all of my foundational stuff, the core principles that we talked about today, the time rules, as well as how to create an ideal calendar, how to create your goals, those things that are going to make it so much easier to succeed, those are all available on demand in Attorney Freedom University. And so the only other thing I can do to help you succeed is have you join that as well. And so the 12-week program's $2,000. Attorney Freedom University is $495 a month. I'll give you the $2,000 back if you do everything on the checklist. Or I'll allow you to apply it doubly to any future services. So if there's something you're like, man, I'd love to work with Chris on this, I'll double your money on the back end and let you apply it to that if you're interested. So either way, I'm happy to give your money back or double your money on the back end if there's other things you want. So that would be my challenge to you, is if you can honestly say, hey, I want to make $10,000 a week. I'm willing to devote 1 to 2 hours a week to learn how, and I'm willing to put some skin in the game to make this happen. I think you'd be a good fit for the challenge. Anybody who can say yes to that is going to be a good fit to the challenge. And I'll send you the info so you can figure out how to do it. If not, that's okay. If you don't want to make $10,000 a week, I'm fine with that too. Like, I think that's cool. As long as you're creating the lifestyle that you want, this challenge may not be right for you, but just don't allow yourself to be unhappy. Don't allow yourself to just sit there and be like, I'm okay not making enough. I'm okay not being able, wondering if I have enough money for food. I'm okay wondering if I'm going to make my payments on my house this month or not. Don't do that. You deserve a whole lot more than that. So, all right. Well, that's everything I have on time management. If you have any other questions, just please feel free to reach out. If you're interested in that challenge or in the time audit, drop a comment in the either drop a comment or send us a direct message and we'll get you taken care of. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week. And as always, if you're watching this live, I have to wait for the other programs to catch up. So you get to hang out with me for one last second. And looks like that last program caught up. So thanks, everyone. See you next time.